One of the best investors of the last 50 years is George Soros. He grew his fund 30% compound rate between 1970 and 2000, a 30-year run that is just difficult to match for any investor in any time scale. But he's still at it, operating a $7 billion portfolio today. And it's really interesting to look at what is in that portfolio, what's publicly disclosed, and what sort of investments he's in. Because as I started digging into this, you see a little bit of a theme at the top. And it may not be the kind of companies that you would think of or the kind of investments that you might think of from somebody with such a long history. So I'll get to those in just a second. My name's Travis Hoium. Thanks for watching Asymmetric Investing. Please subscribe here on YouTube for all my content. And thanks to this video sponsor, The Motley Fool. Check out fool.com/ASYM for their top 10 stocks to buy right now. And let's just take a look at the portfolio overall. The Soros Fund Management LLC is a $7 billion fund. 33% of the fund is in the top 10 holdings, and there are a total of 209 holdings. So a very large number of stocks. This is one of the more diversified portfolios that I've looked at from some of these better known investors. A lot of them are much more concentrated, but you see a theme here at the top. First of all, the biggest position is actually Invesco QQQ. So the NASDAQ 100, an ETF that's actually tracking, that's $500 million in the portfolio. So that's really a diversified way to invest in the tech industry. And I think this will be a theme as we go through this. The second is Horizon Therapeutics. Now, this is not a stock that I was aware of before. Horizon Therapeutics was actually acquired by Amgen on October 6th. So this filing that we're looking at here was as of September 31st. So that's why there was still that big position. But then they were acquired for cash on October 6th. The second biggest stock holding was actually Activision Blizzard. Similarly, this deal closed in early October. So Soros had a big position in Activision Blizzard that then turned into cash once the deal closed in October. What do those two stocks have in common? They were a merger arbitrage position. Now, we don't know if there was some other hedged positions, some option positions, or other ways that Soros may have been taking risk off the table in case those deals didn't close. But what he was saying was, okay, if a stock is going to be acquired at $100 per share and the stock is trading at $95 per share, I can make $5 per share by just waiting until the deal actually closes. So both of those deals, that was the arbitrage play, was I'm going to buy the stock at a price lower than that buyout price and just turn it into cash. So in total, that's about $650 or so million worth of cash that would have been generated in October when both of those deals closed. The next couple of stocks in the portfolio are C Limited and Alphabet. And I think those are two really interesting ones because they're tech stocks and they're growth stocks. So a lot of this exposure is going into the tech industry and kind of the bigger names in the tech industry. You can see that C Limited has been kind of up and down over the past couple of years, but now is a fairly sizable position, about as big as Soros has ever had in that company. And then Alphabet, most of this position was actually acquired in mid-2022. The third quarter report was when the big increase happened and now owns about 1.4 million shares of Alphabet stock. So it's really ridden that one throughout 2023. It's always interesting to see that a lot of these big investors have been some of the biggest beneficiaries from something like the growth in the Magnificent Seven. Soros is no different, not only with that QQQ position, but also with this Alphabet position. Alphabet, is, I would argue, is one of the better values in tech right now, especially those big tech companies. So very interesting stock for George Soros to be owning. Another one that caught my eye is actually Rivian. Rivian is one that Soros acquired a fairly big position late in 2021, and that has not done very well. That's one that has now declined just 1% of the portfolio, but that was 28% of the portfolio as of 2021. So that has slowly been sold off over time. It's up a little bit in the most recent quarter, but I think what you're seeing there is Soros losing faith in that investment in particular. AirCap is another one that caught my eye, 1.65% of the portfolio, but this is a relatively new one. All of this has been acquired in 2023, and so this is where he's starting to put money. Those interest rates start going up, looking for more yield in investments. And the airline industry, I think, is going to be a phenomenal place to look for that yield because there's still a supply constrained environment because there's just not enough aircraft and enough pilots. So a great asset to own and generate yield is going to be something like AirCap, which actually owns the airplanes that a lot of people are flying on. Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/ASYM for the top 10 stocks to buy right now. Going through this list, I think it's really interesting to see the really relatively high risk companies that Soros is investing a lot into. Wayfair, MicroStrategy, Lyft, Cloudflare, Dish Network. A lot of these companies are companies that have not done very well, and I would argue are in actually pretty weak strategic positions. But he obviously sees some sort of turnaround in those companies. Now, these aren't massive positions, and Soros is known for taking really big positions when he has a lot of conviction. So these are relatively small positions. Maybe he's buying them at the bottom, seeing some sort of opportunity. I wanted to end by just looking at this portfolio overall. Again, you can see what really stands out is the diversification. And the $3.75 billion in market cap that you see on the right, those are the individual stocks. And I'll throw some of these up on the screen here, is the positions in ETFs like Invesco. Some of these other tickers didn't get pulled in there from the system that I'm pulling this from. So you can see this full list. You can see that there's a number of ETFs. And this is really striking because as I've looked at more and more of these big investors, a lot of them are betting on specific names, especially if you're running a hedge fund. You don't want to be investing in the same things that everybody else is investing in. But in a lot of ways, that's exactly what Soros is doing. He's much more of a macro investor. So what are the macro trends that we're seeing here? We're seeing a bet on the NASDAQ 100, that QQQ. He has a position in the iShares investment grade bond ETF. And there's a couple of those that have different durations or different lengths of the amount of bonds that they have. And then the other big position that I talked about earlier were actually arbitrage positions. So these weren't necessarily big investments on a trend for therapeutics or for gaming, something like that. They're just bets on the fact that those acquisitions are going to close at all and being able to take the 5, 10, 15% arbitrage in owning those stocks until the acquisition closes. That's something that any investor can do. I think it's much more high risk when you can't necessarily hedge out a lot of the risks. Like I mentioned earlier, it's possible that he's hedged out some of the risks that come with those acquisitions. But Soros is making much more macro bets and many more investments that he's looking for yield than he is betting on specific stocks. Once you get to the small specific stocks, you're talking about more like 1.5% of the portfolio or less. That's a lot of diversification in the portfolio. So I think a lot to take away there for investors. But it's interesting that these are the kind of investments that he's making. Not the kind of investments you would have been buying in the 1970s, 1980s. He's really transitioned to be much more of a tech investor. And most of that exposure, even just through the ETF, is in those bigger tech names, that NASDAQ 100 tech names. So that was a little bit surprising when digging into Soros's portfolio. Taking a lot of big swings. Rivian was one that didn't work out. He's sold entirely out of that position, but a lot of other small swings as well. So what did you think about looking at Soros's portfolio a little bit? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to Asymmetric Investing. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you here next time.